Your phone buzzed earlier today, and before you even looked at the screen, some part of you braced for impact. That is not an accident. That is not simply how everyone experiences a ringing phone. That specific flinch, the tightening in your chest before you even know who is calling, has been trained into you by a season where too many calls to this home have carried news you did not want to hear. The doctor's office. The school. A number you did not recognize that turned out to be someone you owed money to. A family member calling with the kind of voice that told you, before they said a single word, that whatever came next was not going to be easy. You have started living braced. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone watching you would necessarily notice, but internally, quietly, every single time this house receives a call, an email, a letter in the mailbox with a return address that makes your stomach drop before you have even opened it. You check the mail with something close to dread. You let unfamiliar numbers go to voicemail because you need a moment to prepare yourself before finding out what they want. This home, the place that is supposed to feel like your softest landing place in the entire world, has started to feel like the place where difficult news keeps finding you. My child. I know exactly how heavy that has become. I know the specific weight of walking through your own front door and feeling your shoulders tighten instead of relax, because too many times, this exact space has been where you received news that changed everything, and not for the better. I need you to hear something before I explain anything else. Good news is coming to this home. Not eventually, in some distant, abstract future. Soon. Specifically. To this exact address, this exact family, this exact life you have been holding together through a season that has tested you far more than you let most people see. I know how difficult that is to believe after everything this home has already absorbed. You have hoped for good news before and watched it fail to arrive, or worse, watched what looked like good news turn out to be more complicated than it first appeared. I am not offering you another fragile hope to hold on to for a few days before disappointment finds its way back in. I am telling you something true about what is already in motion, in ways you cannot currently see, heading directly toward the place where you live. You have been carrying a private exhaustion that most people who know you have not fully seen. The version of you that answers, "Everything is fine," when someone asks how things are going, because the real answer feels like too much to explain, and you are not sure anyone actually has room to hear it fully. You have gotten remarkably skilled at holding a household together through difficulty that would have broken far weaker people. Managing the finances quietly so your children do not sense the full weight of what you are carrying. Showing up for work with a steady face while your mind is somewhere else entirely, running through calculations, worries, contingency plans for whatever might come next. You have prayed for this home more times than you could count. Not always with eloquent words. Sometimes just a whispered, "Please, let something go right for once," muttered while doing dishes or driving to pick up a child or lying awake at 2 in the morning running through everything currently unresolved. I heard every one of those prayers, my child. Every single whispered please that felt, in the moment, like it was disappearing into silence. I want to speak directly to the specific role you have played in this household during the difficult season, because I do not think anyone has adequately acknowledged it. You have likely become the one who absorbs bad news first, screening it before anyone else in your family has to face it directly. You read the medical results before explaining them gently to others. You review the bills before deciding what to share and what to quietly manage yourself. You have positioned yourself, whether consciously or not, as a kind of buffer between your household and the full weight of whatever difficulty has been unfolding. That role has cost you something significant, beloved. The constant absorbing, the perpetual screening, the exhaustion of protecting everyone else from the full scope of what you already know. I see that cost clearly, even when no one else in your household fully recognizes what it has required of you. When good news finally arrives at this address, I want you to actually receive it as fully as you have been absorbing the difficult news, rather than immediately calculating how to responsibly manage or distribute it to everyone else first. You are allowed to simply feel relief. You are allowed to let good news land in your own heart before you start thinking about how it affects everyone around you. You have earned that, after everything this season has required of you. I want to gently walk you through how this season of bracing began, because understanding it will help release something you have been carrying that was never entirely fair to place on your own shoulders. For some of you, it began with a single piece of devastating news, a diagnosis, a job loss, a call that changed the entire trajectory of your family in a single afternoon. And ever since that moment, some part of you has remained on alert, half expecting the next call to bring something equally difficult, because the world proved once that it could deliver a blow without warning, and you have not fully trusted its silence since. For others, it was not one dramatic event but an accumulation. Bill after bill. Setback after setback. Small disappointments that individually would have been manageable, but stacked together over months or years until your entire household developed a kind of chronic bracing, always waiting for the next difficulty rather than actually resting in whatever peace currently existed. Some of you responded to this by trying to control every variable you possibly could, checking accounts obsessively, reading every piece of mail with intense scrutiny, unable to relax even during genuinely good moments because part of you was always scanning the horizon for the next problem. Some of you responded by going numb instead, disengaging slightly from hope altogether because hoping and then being disappointed again felt like more than your household could continue absorbing. I understood every one of those responses, beloved. None of them were wrong. They were simply what surviving a prolonged season of difficult news required of your household. There is a particular kind of hypervigilance that develops in a household that has weathered too many hard seasons, and I want to name it specifically, because you have likely never heard anyone describe it quite this precisely before. It is the inability to fully enjoy a good day without some part of you waiting for it to be interrupted. A pleasant evening with your family, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice asks what is going to go wrong next. A moment of financial breathing room, and instead of relaxing into it, you immediately begin calculating how long it will last before the next unexpected expense arrives. That vigilance developed for good reason. It kept you prepared during seasons when preparation genuinely mattered. But I want you to notice how exhausting it has become to live inside a state of constant readiness for the next difficulty, unable to fully receive the good moments because you are always half-braced for what might follow them. I am not simply promising you good news arriving once, a single moment of relief before the vigilance returns. I am beginning the process of teaching your nervous system, your household's collective sense of safety, that rest is possible again. that a good day does not always have to be followed by a difficult one. That this home can hold genuine peace without that peace feeling like a setup for eventual disappointment. There is something happening right now that I need you to understand before I tell you what it means for your specific home. There was a woman in the town of Shunem who showed great kindness to the prophet Elisha, providing him a room whenever he passed through her town, expecting nothing in return. When Elisha wanted to bless her for that generosity, she initially said she needed nothing, that she was already content among her own people. But Elisha knew something she had not yet said aloud, a longing for a child she had quietly stopped hoping for after years of disappointment. And that year, exactly as promised, she held a son in her arms. Years later, that same household faced a famine, and the woman had to leave her home and land behind entirely, an uncertain season of displacement with no guarantee of what she would return to. When she finally came back, she went before the king to request her house and land be restored, and in what can only be described as remarkable timing, the king happened to be in the middle of hearing about her family's story from someone else at the exact moment she walked in to make her request. Her house and land, along with every bit of produce the fields had yielded in her absence, were fully restored to her that very day. My child, that kind of timing, a request arriving at the precise moment a heart was already prepared to grant it, is not something that woman engineered through her own strategy. It was orchestrated far above what she could see or plan for herself. And I want you to understand that this same kind of precise, unexplainable timing is already being arranged for your own household. I also think of a Roman centurion whose servant was gravely ill, close to death, in his own home. This man had authority, resources, access to physicians, and none of it was solving the crisis unfolding under his own roof. He came to me, not asking me to travel to his house, simply asking me to speak a word from where I already stood. He said, "Just say the word, and my servant will be healed." And I did. From a distance, without ever stepping foot inside that home, healing reached exactly where it needed to reach, at the exact moment it was spoken. Beloved, I do not need to be standing physically inside your walls to reach your household with what it currently needs. I can speak a word from here, right now, and have it arrive exactly where you live, addressing exactly what has been unresolved in your home for far too long. I think also of the Philippian jailer, a man whose entire household was transformed in a single unexpected night. He was prepared to end his own life, convinced everything had already been lost, when instead he found himself asking what he must do to be saved, and received an answer that extended far beyond himself alone. Believe, and you will be saved, you and your household. That night, his entire family experienced a shift they had not seen coming, salvation and joy replacing what had moments earlier looked like complete catastrophe. I want you to notice something about that story. The good news that reached his household did not arrive because circumstances had finally improved on their own. It arrived in the exact middle of what looked like the worst possible night, an earthquake, a prison in chaos, a man moments away from despair. Good news does not require your circumstances to look promising first. It can interrupt exactly the moment that feels most hopeless, exactly the way it interrupted that jailer's darkest hour. Whatever your household's current version of that dark night looks like, I want you to hold on to this. It does not disqualify you from receiving good news. If anything, It is often the exact setting where the most significant good news tends to arrive, precisely because it is unmistakable when it finally does. If this is speaking to the exact kind of bracing your household has been living inside, I want you to do something. Leave a comment below and write the words, "I am believing for good news" at my address. Let this become a place where others carrying that same dread of the next phone call can stand together, believing alongside you instead of waiting alone. I want to tell you about a family I will call the Coopers, though that is not their real name. They had spent nearly 2 years bracing for a foreclosure notice that seemed, by every practical calculation, almost inevitable. Medical bills from an unexpected surgery had piled on top of an already tight budget, and every month felt like a countdown toward a loss they could see coming from a distance but could not seem to stop. The mother in that family told me she had started sorting mail over the trash can, almost unable to open certain envelopes without steadying herself first. She had rehearsed, more times than she wanted to admit, the conversation she would eventually have to have with her children about needing to move, about losing the only home those children had ever known. Then, on an entirely ordinary afternoon, a letter arrived from a foundation she had applied to almost a year earlier, one she had genuinely forgotten about because so much time had passed without a response. The letter informed her that a portion of their medical debt had been selected for full forgiveness through a program she barely remembered applying for. It was not enough to solve every financial pressure they were facing, but it was enough to shift everything, enough breathing room to stabilize the situation that had felt, for 2 years, like an unstoppable countdown toward losing everything. She told me she sat at her kitchen table and cried for almost half an hour, not only from relief, but from the specific shock of realizing that good news had actually found its way to her address after so long spent only receiving the opposite. Beloved, I tell you the Cooper's story because I want you to understand something about how good news often arrives after a long season of bracing. It rarely comes through the exact channel you have been anxiously watching. It tends to arrive through something you had nearly forgotten, an application submitted months ago, a seed planted long before you expected any harvest, timing that looks, from where you stand, like nothing more than remarkable coincidence. I want to speak to those of you whose household's bracing center specifically around a child, a young adult navigating a difficult season you cannot fully control or protect them from. The phone call from a school. The uncertainty around a diagnosis. The distance of a grown child making choices that keep you awake with worry regardless of how many times you remind yourself they are no longer yours to manage the way you once could. That particular version of dread, worrying on behalf of someone you love more than yourself, carries its own unique exhaustion. I see every one of those specific worries, beloved. I see the version of this dread that centers not on your own well-being but on theirs, which somehow feels heavier precisely because it involves someone you cannot fully protect no matter how much you want to. The good news I am bringing to this household extends fully to them as well, whatever specific situation currently keeps you checking your phone with their name in mind. For those whose bracing centers around a marriage or partnership under strain, wondering whether the next conversation will bring reconciliation or further distance, I want you to know this promise extends there too. The good news heading toward your household is not limited to a single area. It touches every room, every relationship, every corner of what has felt uncertain for too long. I want you to imagine, for just a moment, the version of your household on the other side of this shift. The dinner table where conversation flows without the undercurrent of unspoken worry. The phone that rings and simply gets answered, without that small internal brace beforehand. The mail that gets opened with mild curiosity instead of dread. That household still belongs to you. It is not a fantasy disconnected from your actual life. It is the household I am currently restoring you toward, piece by piece, starting with whatever specific good news reaches your door first. Here is what I am declaring over your household right now. The pattern of difficult news that has defined this home for too long is not the permanent identity of this address. I am interrupting that pattern, and I am beginning with something you are not currently anticipating, arriving through a channel your current bracing has not been focused on watching. I am restoring the ability to answer your phone without flinching, to open your mail without dread, to walk through your own front door and feel it as the refuge it was always meant to be rather than another place difficulty tends to find you. That restoration is not going to happen all at once through willpower alone. It is going to happen because the actual pattern feeding that dread is about to break. I am releasing specific provision toward this household, whatever form your family's greatest current need takes, financial, medical, relational. Whatever has felt most unresolved is exactly what I am beginning to move toward resolution. I am protecting your children from carrying more of this weight than they were ever meant to carry. Whatever they have sensed, even without you saying it directly, I am replacing the quiet unease with a stability they will feel before they can even articulate why things suddenly seem different. And for every difficult call this home has already received, every piece of news that landed harder than your family was prepared for, I am not going to let that be the final word on what this address represents. I am adding a new chapter, one your household is going to remember as the season everything genuinely began to turn. I also want to acknowledge those of you whose bracing extends beyond your immediate household into the wider circle of family you feel responsible for, aging parents whose health updates arrive with the same dread as your own medical calls, siblings navigating their own crises that somehow become yours to carry as well because you have always been the one who holds everyone together. That extended weight, caring not only for the household under your own roof but for the wider family orbiting around it, deserves acknowledgement too. The good news I am preparing is not narrowly confined to your own four walls. It extends into every relationship your heart carries responsibility for, every aging parent, every struggling sibling, every extended family member whose difficulties have quietly become part of your own daily bracing. I see the full scope of what you have been carrying, not just the portion visible within your own household, and I am addressing all of it, not only the part easiest to name. I want to prepare you now for what receiving this good news will actually require, because sometimes the hardest part is not the waiting itself, but learning to trust a good moment enough to actually let it in. After a long season of bracing, good news can feel almost disorienting at first, met with suspicion rather than relief, a part of you searching for the catch before allowing yourself to believe it is real. When it arrives, and it will, let yourself receive it fully, without immediately scanning for what might go wrong next. Let your shoulders actually drop instead of remaining tense out of habit. Let your children see you exhale, see relief on your face instead of the careful, managed expression you have likely maintained for their sake throughout this entire season. They have been watching you carry this weight, even the parts you thought you hid well, and they deserve to see what it looks like when that weight finally lifts. Let me pray over you now. Father, I bring before you this specific household, this home that has absorbed more difficult news than any family should reasonably have to carry in this short a season. You know every phone call that landed like a blow. Every piece of mail opened with trembling hands. Every quiet, exhausted prayer whispered over dishes or during a sleepless night. I ask that you would send good news to this exact address, in your timing, through whatever channel you have already prepared. Let it arrive the way restoration arrived for the woman from Shunem, at precisely the moment it will matter most, orchestrated with a precision only you could arrange. Heal whatever illness or diagnosis currently weighs on this household, the way healing reached the centurion's servant from a distance, through a word spoken rather than a lengthy process this family must exhaustively manage alone. Provide for whatever financial pressure has made this home feel less like a refuge and more like a source of constant calculation. Release provision through unexpected means, the way the Coopers received relief through an application nearly forgotten. Restore peace to this house itself, the physical walls and rooms where this family gathers each day. Let it become again what it was always meant to be, a place of rest rather than a place associated with dread. Protect the children in this home from carrying weight that belongs to the adults, and give the parents strength to shield them well during whatever transition is still unfolding. And Father, for every difficult season this address has already endured, redeem all of it. Let none of the waiting be wasted, and let the good news, when it finally arrives, be received with a gratitude made even deeper by everything this family had to walk through first. In the mighty and precious name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. My child, before you go, hear this clearly. Your address has carried hard news for long enough. Something good is already on its way to your door.